Hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
There we go.
Welcome to the first After Action Report podcast. Look at all the people. Holy cow. There's a good amount of people here. Actually, you see that? I added that today. See at the bottom, it says 12 on YouTube and 5 on Facebook.
Right.
That's live people that are in here. So I'm sure it'll go up and down as time goes on. But we are honored to have our first guest, Mike Callan.
You
How
know,
are you,
we
Mike?
Thank you. I'm glad there's just two. When there's only two in class, it's a class. With one, I got to take somebody out and buy them breakfast.
well, we've been trying to do something like literally since we began. I think you were actually one of the first people we talked to about doing something like this multiple years ago. And I'm just so excited that this is finally coming to fruition, where we can sit and like dive into the mind of, some of the founders. And we're so excited to have you here as the first.
Yeah.
Hey, I would agree with you, but you started 5 years too late. We'll see how much I've forgotten already.
Yeah. So since it's this format is a little different than we've normally done, you can see up in the top corner we have anybody that posts a good content or question or whatever. Throw it into the social media, either on Facebook or YouTube, and we will throw it up there. And we are going to plan on asking Mike during a break or whatever in his Q&A part, and we'll just throw in some stuff in here. There's one rule of AAR. There is no rules. We're just going to let Mike rip.
All right, what are you going to do
night,
for the
guys.
other
Strap in.
45 minutes?
We'll carry it. Don't worry.
All right.
Well, all right. So first off, I don't think everybody out here knows who you are. So if you wouldn't mind, what is your career, your background in hazmat? What was your inspiration? All that jazz. What brought you to the table?
52 cents an hour more than I was making driving a truck. That's how I took the job. I went to college, to show you the infinite wisdom of Mike Callan. I went to college, went for 4 years, and quit my senior year. When we met, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, when we were in Indiana, that was where I went to school. I went south. I was about 40 miles south of Indianapolis in a town called Franklin. And I went to school there. I came home, and I was driving a truck, and I came home in June and saw in September that they were advertising for firefighters, and it was $1.98. So I said, okay, well, I'm making more. I'm only making $1.42. I'll take the test. And took the test, passed the test. And if I got into how I actually came to work one day, I get called on Friday saying, or Thursday, can you be at the firehouse at 6? I go, yeah. And they brought me in, and they said, did you try a coat on? I go, yeah. And did you try any boots? I go, yeah, those boots over there. And he says, okay, grab the boots, grab the coat. You're on the back with Larry. He says, any questions? And I said, am I hired? And he goes, yeah, no one told you? I thought they were looking for a 9.5. That's why I figured I got the job. And it started from there. I meant to tell you guys, the guy that my first lieutenant wanted to be on the city fire department, took the test and finally got asked, but he was already in Wallingford, and he turned it down, and everybody was absolutely beside themselves that he turned down going into the city. But I was lucky enough to have him as a lieutenant. Neil Johnson probably would have fit well with you guys too. He certainly would have had a white helmet somewhere along the line. So I got into hazmat only because of, we can talk about it, but just stupid mistakes. I knew nothing about hazmat other than chemicals were down Cherry Street. If you went down South Cherry Street, there was American Cyanamide, BYK Malincroft. Actually, about a year before I got hired, we had 2 chemical companies burning on the same day. Yeah, wow. So what I didn't know then was some of those guys were going off duty because of respiratory problems. and so they hired a bunch of us. But back then they were getting big grants and things like that. So I knew, I took the tours, but again, everything was Class B fires. There was no placards. I had no
Give us a
placards.
year.
We had a
what time
diamond.
frame is this?
I came on in 72. January 3rd, 1972. And I always liked that because they hired me January 3rd because it was the last day of my shift. If they had hired me on December 28th, they would have had to pay me longevity earlier. I went the first year with no vacation, and they wonder why I was bitter. So I took the calls. We went to everything. It didn't make a difference. And I think I mentioned it to you at the beginning. I realize now, getting ready for this, is that there was no risk. We didn't go to chemicals. It was only Class B fires and then a couple of materials that we would call exotic metals. Okay, you know them as Class D then.
Okay.
And now we call them sodium, magnesium, titanium. But they always remembered exotic metals because I figured, if you set up a tent out back as a hazmat instructor, charge $5 to let them throw sodium in water, they'd come back to you. Okay.
You get dollar bills thrown at you like an exotic dancer.
Yeah, I mean, and they didn't. I'll tell you, when they put water on sodium, or we would do these little experiments back when we first started teaching, because we all carried these chemical kits, which probably today you'd be arrested. Okay, in fact, I know a couple of guys that were almost arrested. And what happened was that we would take calls that we weren't sure what we're doing. I know one fire department in Connecticut reported light smoke showing in a factory. It wasn't light smoke, it was hydrochloric acid, and it was the white vapor that they saw. Chlorine, I had one guy go to chlorine, his belt buckle changed color. Okay.
And this is all as a firefighter.
As all firefighters, SCBA, that's when you put your SCBAs on. In the early days, you didn't even wear breathing apparatus because in some departments, air costs money.
Oh, yeah.
So the chief would have to order masks. Now, for us, it wasn't that bad. The chief understood masks, but he wanted to keep the ladder truck as long as he could. So the early ladder truck would it took a chief's order to get the ladder truck out of the building. Now, that was before me, but that that was bought in 48, lasted till like 78. So... and then that's it.
Then you said that there was really no Class D fires. I know we've evolved. Like, I always make the joke in class that, when I came on, we had the fire triangle, and then when it was cheap, they bought that fourth corner because it was on sale, and they put the fire tetrameter in. And I make this joke, but seriously, what was the regulatory landscape on back then? Was there a hazmat? I know OSHA came out at a certain point. I don't remember when.
OSHA came in 1970.
So you were on after OSHA popped out.
But all OSHA handled back then was material safety data sheets. They actually taught you how to write a material safety data sheet. The worker right to know is 1970. So that was when I say material safety data sheet, it was a sheet. One page, 13 sections.
Bad.
And firefighting was after dead rats. Okay. They would tell you how it would kill a rat, but you had to wait till section 12 to figure out how to put it out. I always used to say, I don't care about the rats. Tell me if I can use water. Right. I mean, think about it, guys. You know the copper extinguishers, right? The sodium bicarbonate. Well, what you don't know, if you didn't, we made $5 an extinguisher for filling them in the basement. We'd unscrew the top, and in the top was a frame. And in that frame, you put a bottle of sulfuric acid with a little lead top. Then you would mix the sodium bicarbonate, seal it again, and when they inverted it, the top came off, the H2SO4 came in, that was where your pressure was coming from. Now imagine that and this is why I got rid of them, in something that didn't work. You would blow the thing up. So yeah, there was a Class D extinguisher, but it was very rare that you would see it because there was only a couple of companies that needed it. So we would use theirs. So, no placards, no labels, a 10-inch by 4-inch orange sign that said corrosive, flammable. We always joked because the only diamond on the truck was actually typewritten information about the chemical inside. And we used to joke and say, go up and read that. And if you can read it, the last line should be, if you can read this, you're too close.
Mike,
So that was-
I got a good question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I got a good question for you. It's a good one. Nostalgia question. My first introduction to hazmat was in the 1980s with Mike teaching Surviving the Hazmat series. How has the fire service as a whole evolved, or have we evolved?
Well, I've still got 20 sitting on the shelf about 4 feet away from me. I can't find a VHS to download it onto a disc. Because all right. First of all, if I was preparing, I can actually give you the flyer. And if you look at all the guys that are down that list, Hildebrand, Knoll, Callan, Eversole, Lee Sack.
I've never heard of any of them.
Oh God, they every one of them had a skill set. Some of them, like you said, there are some that went on to do other great things. But there were almost everything in the early days was you were talking to people. It would be like, in the old days, it would be like all the sheriffs that turned into guys like, Wyatt Earp and people like that. But they were just regular people. These were guys trying to learn what we were trying to learn. And that's why my job was to talk about oxidizers because of the nitric acid incident, the incident that got me in there. So they found out about that. The guy that put that together actually saw me, I think I told you guys this, in 88, 89, I got the FDIC Instructor of the Year. He came up to me and said, I want you on my program. He says, what can you talk about? And I said, well, oxidizers is what I'm pretty good at, but he liked the way I talk, so I got the introduction too. Boy, that you even saw those is amazing.
Well, it's for the name just dropped down. It was Kent. What was it? Kent
Cochran.
Cochran.
He's on Facebook, so he's watching on Facebook. And I just got a message from Christina Baxter. She says Mike's doing great.
Oh well, thank you, thank you.
Actually,
Doc.
tell Christina congratulations. She did better.
All right, so in your experiences and challenges as you're going from firefighter to hazmat world, like describe that transition for us. Like, how did you end up going from firefighter to hazmat person? I'm assuming in the time frame as the hazmat evolved slowly, that transition evolved slowly, or for you was it an instant switch over?
There was a transition. For example, cryogenics didn't hit until late 79, early 80s, where they found ways to make cryogenics faster, better. So we started seeing cryogenics. We started seeing, when we had a lot of cryogenics, we saw chemicals. I worked in Wallingford, Connecticut was steel. That whole section, Meriden, Wallingford, North Haven, they made silverware. We made silverware, and that required plating. Okay, so we were real good with acids. The problem was they'd been plating with acids for 200 years. They were using gravity tanks on the roof or elevated and running the liquid through the building by gravity. And we discovered all these things basically by risk. We would see what would happen when somebody got hurt. We had an ambulance, but back then the ambulance was another way of getting a hearse painted red and white. I always thought that that was kind of the irony of being in a red and white hearse doing compressions on somebody was just, you never died in the ambulance, you always died in the emergency room. So with burns, you had to be careful what you touched, or, you kept their eyes and their face, but their skin would get burned sometimes on occasion. I saw a guy get burned where they stripped everything off. They were being washed, but decorum made them keep their underwear on. And when it was all said and done, his biggest burns were from the waist to the upper thigh, because we didn't understand it. That was the thing. Now, to talk about the changes, it isn't a change, it was the event. Because all of us met again after the 89 thing. Well, maybe 89, 91. We were also meeting at the National Fire Academy at the Hazardous Materials Incident Analysis course, or the Chemistry of Hazardous Materials. And so that's where I met Jerry Gray out of San Francisco, and I met a guy that was big in hazmat, kid by the name of Tom Corporandi out of Oakland. He was a good buddy. Hank DuPont went to those classes. Greg Knoll went to those classes. And so I would say we were there so early, there was no bar at the National Fire Academy. We had to go.
We drank ourselves.
Yeah, well, we used to have to go downtown in the rain, in the snow.
Uphills both ways.
Uphill both ways just to get a drink. Okay. Because that's what old guys tell you. So for me, everybody had their event. That was really the key, is what got you, I mentioned it to Bobby. I realize now in hindsight that we didn't understand risk. We didn't even understand hazards, let alone risk. So, for example, I spent a lot of time teaching oxidizers because of nitric acid. I laughed because I was at Massachusetts 2 years ago, and a guy comes up to me and he says, I put up a red cloud. And he goes, "Clouds are bad, clouds with color are worse." I said, where did you hear that? And he goes, "I don't know. I just know it." And he's quoting me. Okay. All right. And I just wasn't ready for that, because that was the event. I went to a dumpster fire. That dumpster fire was pushing red smoke. In Wallingford, 20 minutes is all the time you get to play with a dumpster. Then you got to fill it up because we got to go back. We got more important things to do.
Yeah. Dinner's cooking.
So we filled it up. And then these 1 liter bottles started popping up. 1 liter bottles of nitric acid. I hooked one. As I was on the back, I didn't have the nozzle guy was, he was beginning to feel sick. I wasn't sick yet. But then all of a sudden, I started having trouble breathing. My wrists were burning. My eyes were burning. Because we're talking early 80s on a dumpster fire. We didn't even touch the box in the back. Okay.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there, and I'm not feeling good. And that means that the battalion, or actually deputy chief back then, is showing up. He's yelling at me. "Well, what's going on?" I said, "I don't feel good." And he goes, "It is a true story." He says, "Well, that's it right there, Callan. You're sitting over the diesel. Go to the other side of the truck." So I went to the other side of the truck and said I wasn't feeling better. So, and then I discovered what the problem was. And the more I knew, I remember I went to school for 4 years. I went to college. In Wallingford, when I joined the fire department, college was not appreciated. Okay. We don't like you, Callan, because you got college. We don't like college here. Okay. So imagine with me in an orange book. Okay. And
trying to
teaching
figure
them
out
that
what
they
you've
have.
been exposed to.
But they understood something. So anyway, bottom line was I realized that I could have, I think you've seen me do it. I came this close. I always do this. That's the sign for near miss in the fire service. We don't talk about near misses. We have a signal. I came that close to dying. Okay. Not to mention, I've had pneumonia on this side 3 times in the same spot. So you tell me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You tell me. But I got a call from IBM up in up the river on 9W, and they said Port Huron or something like that, maybe. And they said, "Hey, we heard you're an expert on oxidizers. We want a class on oxidizers." So I went to do a class at IBM. I said, "Right, all right." And so I started learning more and more about it. We had basic recognition coming out of the Fire Academy. Hazardous materials incident analysis. If anybody gets their hands on that, they should study it because that's Benner. And Benner is a lost art in the fire service. And if you understand Benner, you're going to be better off. That thing I did in Baltimore, I enjoyed doing it because I talk about Benner teaching all of us with basic recognition. And then Mike and Benner and Charlie Wright doing hazardous materials incident analysis, stress, breach, release,
Yes.
and pinch, okay? And then OSHA comes along. Well, Mike and Greg come out with the 8 steps. OSHA comes along with 1910-120. You look at those 4 things, and I had a slide that I every once in a while I felt good about it. I looked at those 4 things when I was looking at my slides the night before, and I said, "Oh my God, everything we're teaching at this conference is in those 4 columns." And the one thing that was missing was risk. And risk is what I have focused on most of my life because that's how you see the evolution of my safe, unsafe, and dangerous goes all the way back to the early 90s. Even to the point of why did I get sick and some other people just get their nose irritated? Okay, we had cyanide bricks, but there was 4 guys in Providence, Johnston, which was a notorious hazardous materials waste site. They died from handling them. So we were beginning to understand risk. Why we couldn't wear OBAs, why it wasn't useful to wear filter respirators, we would start wearing SCBA. That's why they don't, even to this day, a lot of firefighters don't like level C because they don't feel comfortable with a filter respirator.
Yeah,
So,
and it's hard to
anyway,
breathe.
you're going to have to do this every once in a while because I'll take something and run with it for the whole day.
That's fine. I got a quick question from the audience before I don't see who put it up, but they want to know in hindsight, looking back at your series from the 80s, do you feel like the things that you taught in the 80s in that class, does it still fit and is it applicable for the world of hazmat today?
You know, it's funny you should mention that because right after COVID, the first time I was back in Baltimore, so that's either 2 years or 3 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. Can't say for sure, but let me give you what I did a class, and I enjoyed doing it because I was teaching again. But at the end of the class, I asked a question, and I talked about it in Baltimore this year. I'm always uncomfortable that I'm as smart as some of these other people that we have in our world today. But I asked the group, I said, am I still relevant? And the group answered in such a way, maybe almost in unison, because I can remember my knees buckling. My knees have only buckled twice. Once then, and once when my wife came into me and she says, I think we're having 2. Fortunately, Matthew was a big guy. Okay, so, but now to answer your question to the 80s, yeah, because I look at what I do a lot as the bottom of the pyramid. That pyramid goes all the way up to a single golden point, okay? And you need guys up there, okay? I just realized that, am I doing this or are you guys doing this? You can't be putting things over my head without warning me ahead of this.
We didn't do that like that.
Oh, okay, so,
I've never seen
okay, all right.
The heart, wait, you didn't just do the heart, Bob?
I probably did the heart thing. So I already know I can't use emojis. Tell me what I can't do with my hands before we get into trouble.
Mike, we've never seen that happen before, ever.
Is that a thing? How did you just do that?
Did anybody else see it, or am I
saw it.
hallucinating?
I
Okay.
saw it. I thought Bob was hitting a button on the
All right.
other end. That
I'm going to
All
do
right,
this.
Mike has magic hands.
You see my little finger? My partner, the guy that put all that, the guy that put the hazmat together, has an serious advanced case of Parkinson's right now, and he was my partner all my life. He does that because he calls that the little finger of God. So if I'm talking about being relevant in the base of saving firefighters' lives, the facts of life that I like in the 7 facts of life, safe, unsafe, and dangerous. Look I can get through to guys with nicknames like Bubba and Mongo. If I can get through to Bubba and Mongo, I feel like I've done something. And here's a guy saying clouds with color are worse. I don't know him from Adam, but that's going to save his life someday if he walks in and sees an orange cloud. Or worse, well, I can't do the tiger story, but if he walks in and sees bromine and it's purple, he's still going to stop. Okay?
Yeah.
oh,
So I would say, yeah, because the 80s, we were learning the same thing we're trying to teach these guys, placards. Okay, chemistry. I avoided chemistry my whole life in high school when I finally realized that everything I do is chemistry.
that must have blown your mind. Yeah, because
Actually, it was industrial hygiene. I took what do they call them, electives, while I was getting my associate's degree, and I took industrial hygiene. And I'm watching all the words that I use now when I teach toxicity. And I sat there and I said, I told Bobby, I had an HS moment. Okay. All right. Holy,
Yeah.
I've been killing myself for the last 15 years.
yes.
Okay. Because I didn't realize it. And I could take smoke. Okay, one, because I was training officer. What made you the training officer? You can take the most smoke. That's why when the old training officers come back in, they are always going, "Oh, how you doing? You know, how long you been doing like that? Oh, I don't know. I only started about a year ago." Okay.
I'm only 19.
Yeah. Oh man, you know. Well, so is it relevant? Absolutely, because we've got meters now sometimes that will tell us what the chemical is, but can't tell us how much.
That's true.
Okay, I want to know the quantity. The quantity is what kills you. If you give me a chemical, I used to like to, before you had computers, we had to use books. Okay, we would have these big plastic cases of books, and I used to say, give everybody a book that'll keep 14 guys out of the incident. Okay. All right. But
well, I
used to look for words like
published stuff that could keep guys away from.
some of them were 3 volumes. Sax's was 3 volumes. Industrial chemical was this big. It kept getting bigger. But in there were words like LC50.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Which I like to talk about comparative hazmat. All hazmat's the same. It's the lower number that kills you. Okay. You can drink alcohol, methanol, the same amount of drinking alcohol will kill you because it's dose. I never knew what dose was. I spent a lot of time trying to explain dose is what gets you. And the irony of it is there's scientists that grew up in the 1500s, Paracelsus, who said the poison's in the dose.
Yes.
And everybody knows that when you're going to give your dog a pill, the vet will say, how much does it weigh?
Yeah.
It's milligrams per kilogram. Actually, my son Matthew is 6'2", maybe 6'4", 270 if he plays rugby. Great sport. Has 3 words: beer, rugby, beer. I wish I could have played that. Okay. However, he's drinking a beer one night at the table, and his mother's upset. He says, that's the second beer. And he says, Ma, I'm big. I can drink 2 beers. It's about dose, Ma. And then he goes, Tell her, Dad.
Don't get me involved.
I'm a monster.
So
Hey, so-
the basics. You can't you can't fight fire until you understand fire.
Right. Right.
But
Exactly.
we've studied fire now so that we have a lot, and we've studied hazmat, so we have very, very smart people, and we have very, very not smart people. I never call anybody anything other than smart and not smart, because if you're not smart and you do something wrong, that lesson will make you smart. Look
I
at
love
the
it.
W with a line through it, right? Do not
Right.
use water. Who invented that? I don't know, but I can tell you what happened the week before they invented it, because they got smart.
Well, we chatted a little bit about the past. Mike Hildebrandt wants to know, where do you see the hazmat teams 10 years from now?
Wow. All right, I'm going to tell you because it's based on a very big epiphany that I saw about 3 weeks, maybe a month ago on 60 Minutes. They have the founder, what they call the grandfather of AI. And he says to the announcer, basically this statement. He says, well, where do you think AI will be in 25 years? Where will hazmat be in 25 years? If you watch how we came from a DOT guidebook to where we are today,
It's a big jump.
okay, this is what he said about what he thought. He said, in 25 years, we may not be the smartest thing on earth.
Interesting.
I don't think we're the smartest things on. I mean, I've been using AI a little bit. It's unbelievable.
Well, and the thing is, they designed, this is what I really was interested in listening to them talk. They designed it as they perceived the brain would work. That's why AI is getting smarter as it goes. Now, that just took, 45 years of computers being identified by an individual who could program when it first came out.
Right.
And Eddie, my driver, wheeled his chair back across the wire, pulled the plug out, and I lost 2 days worth of work because I wasn't saving it. Okay. But now, I mean, I don't know.
So-
I do know this, okay, from being 40 years in the past, I saw the first AI. I didn't know what it was until I saw it. It had a name. His name was Hal.
Oh,
Ah.
Because I heard him say, they said, well, computers are not emotional. They'll never understand humans. And I can remember Hal back
honestly, yeah.
in 67 going, Dave,
Don't do that, Dave.
Dave, I sense you're upset.
My kids play with AI all the time. Their Snapchat has AI. They do AI on the computer. And I tell them all the time, you be nice to that thing. Because I'm telling you, when they take over the world, they're going to remember who said please and thank you. You don't talk nasty to your AI
Now,
ever.
I will give you one. I want to go back to Michael one more time. The first time I met Mike and Greg, they explained to me what the 8-step process was. I go to a derailment 2 years, maybe a year and a half later. The chief, we know the guy, his name is Jack McElfish. He'd come out of Maryland. He knew I had gone to the fire academy. The radio messages people say they heard was, Chief says, go to a third alarm, and he says, find Callan. I got a cop knocking at my door. He drives me down to the site, and Chief McElfish says, you went to the hazmat class, right? I go, yeah. He says, you're in charge. I says, Chief, I'm a lieutenant. There's never been a lieutenant in charge of anything.
A good chief.
Okay. He says, you took the class. What do you want to do? The first thing I said to him was, everybody's too close. Back them up. Okay. And he goes, what do you want to do next? I need the shipping papers. I need the materials. I need to identify if there's any hazmat on this vehicle. He says, what do you want to do next? I pick up one of my shipping papers that says liquefied, the tanker was liquefied carbon dioxide. I did two things. One, I thanked God for that being my first chemical. But the second one I said is they're not protected. They need their gear on and their SCBA. This stuff is a cryogenic. And we didn't have Terminator yet. But they did have the video where you put the hot dog inside the glove. And they knew cryogenics was what made the hot dog break. Okay. So, and then they all backed up. The railroad guy came in the next morning and he looked at everything and he said, "Who's in charge here?" And all of them come in like buzzards, ready to pick the flesh off my body. And he reaches out and he shakes my hand and he says, "This is the best run incident I've ever seen." And all I did was follow the 8 steps, because when I got the liquefied carbon dioxide, there was nothing I was going to do until the railroad showed up. And that was Mike Hildebrand and Greg Knoll. You'll still need to know the 8 steps, or you ain't going to be able to pull it off. You need to have the background of the chemistry. For example, the tanker had been punctured, lost the vacuum. They bring it down to a siding. Every 3 hours, we get calls from the neighborhood. The tanker's blowing up. No, it was relieving the pressure because there was no more thermal insulation.
Right.
We
Doing what
had to
it's supposed to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that would be where I see it going. I think we're going to be there, but somebody still has to. I don't think sometimes you're going to be able to pull the percentages out to say, should we evacuate or should we not evacuate? I think that's going to take sometimes a human saying, you know what? Yeah, I think we do. I think you'll feel more comfortable if the computer agrees with you. But I've seen times where I wanted to walk away and somebody said, "Don't walk away from this yet." And there was something I'm talking fire, but I didn't want to overhaul. It was Christmas Eve, and my driver said, "We got to pull this. We don't want to come back Christmas morning to a fire." So we pulled the wall, and there was embers in there. And his name was Bill Bagansky. And I remember I said, "Boy, I would have lived with that the rest of my life." That I left that house and let it burn.
I think you're right. I think the AI is going to be able to provide us better information, but I think we're still a long ways away from taking the human out of the decision making. I think we're just going to have access to more and better information quicker as far as statistics and research. I think the AI is going to help with that for now, but you'll not always at some point, but you still need that technician. You still need the guy that's going to overpack the drum. You're still going to need the guy that's going to do it. They're still going to have to understand all this stuff in order to perform their job correctly. So I agree. It's there. It's on the horizon, but we're always going to need a human.
Hey, Mike, I want to hear about a couple of things that were hard lessons that you learned. Like maybe you screwed up when you were on the scene, or something that was predicted went sideways and you're like, don't do that again. That kind of stuff.
I'll tell you, it's kind of the same thing. I didn't, I come from a city of 40,000. We have a lot of industry, but I mean, I didn't run everything, but I wanted to know everything. I like the use of case histories, okay? For any number of reasons. But one, in many of these case histories, somebody died, and I don't want that person to be forgotten. I may not know his name, but I'm going to use the lesson. Because if I had a direct line to heaven and said, "Hey, can I use what happened?" I know a firefighter would never say no.
Right.
No, teach him not to do that again, because I wish I had known it. Okay. And so I try to use those case histories as lessons. And when I really say, for example, there's always these case histories that change all of us, whether we know it or not. When I come from I have a rural section, and there are rural areas where you could have somebody trapped in a silo. And in that silo, you might cut the walls to get them out. But the lessons that we learned after Phoenix in the 80s, for me, that changed me. Definitely changed the way I looked at flammables. I came away with that with one of the basic tenets of my decision making, which was if I'm dealing with flammables, I'm going to anticipate and expect ignition is going to occur. Nobody's crawling under a car with putty anymore to plug a gasoline tank. How fast can you crawl backwards out from underneath it when it goes whoomp?
No.
No. You know what? I don't care. That car bursts into flames. Hell, they get mad at us for putting them out anyway. Okay.
Let it burn.
Let it burn. Fortunately, somebody invented a battery that can do that for you now. So
Yes.
Mike, we were just talking about this. Like we recorded an episode earlier today, and one of the things we talked about was using case studies. And I was specifically talking about the what is it? The International Chemical Board. Is that right? ICB?
no, Chemical Safety Board, CSB.
CSB, sorry.
Yeah.
CSB. And all those things are like either catastrophes or fatalities. And then there's maybe you get that like Billy Goldfeder has the near misses.
Near misses, yeah.
But you don't have any type of column where it's like lessons learned and things that were gleaned, like a database of that. Wouldn't that be amazing if everybody had the ability to contribute, like, use the plus? That's called a Phillips head screwdriver. Thanks.
Well, I think you see that. I think you do see it. I mean, what happens though, you don't get the information fast enough because now of the tort liability issues that are out there. Public has a tendency, if something happens, somebody's got to pay for it. Okay. But I think that all of us usually, I think the best lessons learned are these, is that you find somebody from the department that you can talk to, that can talk to something that we all realize almost every case history is there's what's the story in between the lines. Okay, I'll tell you, the one that changed me was in East Orange, New Jersey. They lost a firefighter on the top floor of a 4 or 5 story building because they moved the ladder. And I remember it was in Fire Chief magazine, and I still quote it when I do safety. That fire chief said, until we truly look at line of duty deaths, okay, investigate them, to see if there was human error involved. Then everybody else does it. They look at pilots, they look at everybody else. For us, it seems to be very hard for us to look at line of duty deaths, knowing that perhaps on an occasion, a better decision should have been made. I get very upset. My wife says I yell at the TV when I hear phrases like, if I had to do it again, I'd have done it the same way. Okay, that bothers me. Okay, or the other one that bothers me was he was doing what he loved to do. Yes, he loved to be a firefighter. Okay.
But you know what? I bet you he loved being alive better.
Well, there's 2 things firefighters want in life. They like to fight fires and they like to bitch.
Yeah.
Okay. When I pull you out of a building, you get mad at me because when I ask you to leave, you tell me you still have 5 minutes to go.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But if I get you out, you usually will go back to the station and bitch. You can't bitch dead.
Yep.
Okay. And there'll be more fires. Okay. We really have to focus on preventable deaths. We do a good job in hazmat. I mean, think about it. It's very hard to see the repetitive nature of deaths. I get a little upset with ammonium nitrate. We still got to work on that one. Okay. I mean, we have case history after case history after case history with ammonium nitrate.
We certainly do.
But I think that with everything else, I think case histories are good. I mean, let's put it this way. The FACE reports are real good. I use FACE reports for electricity and natural gas classes because, in fact, the electricity book I wrote is almost every lesson is followed by a FACE report from and what it does is on that first page they'll list bullets. It was always when I first started we have SOPs for envelopes, but we don't have SOPs for electricity. Okay. So, and that was when I started in 2004, but we're getting there. So, I mean, natural gas requires SOPs. I mean, everything requires not necessarily an SOP for you to follow it, but guidelines so that we know what we're doing. And we didn't have those when I started. You didn't have guidelines that are SOPs.
Okay, so you didn't have guidelines, you didn't have SOPs, and things were new. When I was going through hazmat, starting out, I found that there was a lot of absolutely ridiculous stuff that people did based upon rules or things that they thought were real. Perfect example, I had done my time in hazmat. I was working in a fire company. There was a CO leak, a high exposure. We're going into the basement, and I turned my flashlight on in the basement, and the officer flipped his shit because I turned a source of ignition, but we're down there in the basement with no SCBA on. So, I'm kind of like, well, wait, if you think there's good, like the numbers, like the whole thing, just like a little small part of my brain shut off and then aneurysmed based on trying to figure out what his logic was. So back when you were coming through, when hazmat was first starting up, what kind of absolutely nonsensical rules were put into play based upon things that people really didn't fully understand? At least you can look back on them now and be like, oh my God, I can't believe we implemented that. That was the stupidest thing we ever did. Or something that somebody else implemented.
Well, I'm going to answer your first question because I like your first question as a lesson. What you just described was you would have had to gotten to 120,000 parts per million to get that to ignite.
Right.
You'd have been dead at 10,000 parts per million.
Easily. Yeah.
Okay.
And I tried to explain that to the officer.
No,
I was like, what we're down there without an SCBA. You're bitching at me we'd be dead but we're going to die before that explodes. He didn't get it.
No, because, for example, one of the things, a lot of the times was the ignitions they always were worried about ignitions with the rotating lights on the back of the truck. If it was a gas cloud, that could be it.
Okay.
Now, but I think you got to look at it two ways. One, you were talking to somebody. Always remember that the person that's communicating with you may not always agree with you. I know that much, but they're also older usually. And we have different concepts sometimes of the way we think things should be done because you'll hear the answer. Why?
Because that's how we've always done it, right?
Or I've been doing it the same way for
forever.
Or you get an orange book. You get an orange book thrown at you by two guys to say, look we don't fight fires with books in this organization, okay? And you got to know that the first books we had were colored red with one word. Hose. Ladders.
Put blue on red.
Okay. We had to wait to fire officer and fire inspector in order. That was the second generation of books. I think for me the way it was good. Since we're on the flammables, it didn't smell flammable.
That's a valid point. I mean, it probably didn't.
I'll give you mine. Okay, is that if you had a natural gas release, it was only unless it was a heavy odor that you called the gas company, or they were coming anyway because somebody got them called, notified them. And that was always in the procedures, notify the gas company. Thanksgiving. Now I'm giving you something 4 months before my first combustible gas indicator. I'm on duty Thanksgiving. We get a fire in the sewer. And they think it could be gas, so we call the gas company. Now it smells like leaves, it felt like leaves, but the gas company comes and the guy goes, he puts the wand down And he comes back up again, and he comes over to me. He says, there's nothing in there. Everything's okay. He says, I'm going back. You're all set. I said, okay. We're pulling up, we stretched a hose or something. And the police officer comes up to me and says, we got a problem. I go, what do you mean we got a problem? He says, the gas guy's asleep in the truck. I go, what? The gas guy's asleep in the truck. He says, I don't know what to do. I says, well, do you think he had too much turkey maybe? Okay, because we didn't want to ask the second question, okay? Right. And I just realized that I had just put my life in the hands of somebody. I didn't know his name. I didn't know what he was sticking in there and how to read it. I said, after that, I went to the chemical company, American Cyanamid. And I said, do you have meters? And they go, yeah. And they gave me an explosive meter. And they said, this is how you work it. And back then you had to use an aspirating pump, and it was an analog dial. So if it went up and down again, you already had a problem because you'd walked into a too rich atmosphere and it wouldn't work any, okay? And you would get that because they would stick it down in the liquid, okay? So once you had meters, and I did it myself, when I first wanted to create the hazmat team in New Haven County, we wanted all kinds of stuff, but I realized that what we should have done instead of getting this big truck was you should have gotten a Blazer with, level B and meters and run to the calls, analyze it, assess the hazards, then call for the big truck. We went with the big truck first, simply because that was what we thought. We need all this equipment. And actually, I think the biggest equipment we ever had, we still don't do it well, was can every fire department in the United States handle a gasoline tank truck turned over on fire? That's the number one hazard you got going through your town.
Yeah. And
we still we can't calculate foam. We probably will let it burn, which is what we only one I've ever been advising on, which was a Meriden, saying, let it burn. You got $1.20 gallon of gas, and you got $15 gallon foam. Let it burn.
Yeah, and the cleanup is going to be far more expensive when you overflood it with the water and the gas goes everywhere, and now it's an EPA issue.
But I write an article about this, about how it's hard to tell firefighters where there's the enemy in front of them. Burning like a...
Listen, with the lithium-ion batteries nowadays, we're coming into the same issue. It's like, we'll let the freaking car burn, and then over and over again, there's articles, 60,000 gallons of water to put the fire out. I'm like, no, you just use 60,000 gallons, and when the battery decided it wasn't going to burn anymore, it stopped. You didn't do anything to put it out. So yes, it's literally the same concept, and still can't get it across.
You'll still have that one guy though. Every once in a while, will go, shh, and you got to go over and talk him down. Okay,
it's like so exciting. Like,
you can't do that. I know it's right, but the stairs all on fire. Okay,
Mike,
it's not going to do anything.
I got one question for you before we take a 5-minute break. I want to. Somebody's asking. So what happened to the gas guy that was taking a nap?
Well, we had to use, and I say this now, remember, we're talking to early 80s, maybe late 70s. I had to use my discretion. I told the cop and I both agreed that the cop took the keys, okay, and left a little note saying, if you want these keys, call the police department, we'll bring them back, okay? Because back then, that was like the question they would always ask you, what would you do if you had a guy come to work drunk? Well, you answered it the way you were supposed to, but the way in the early 70s, Joe, you okay?
Yeah.
Joe, you look a little sick. Why don't you go home, Joe? Okay. Okay. I realize now, just saying that though, Joe got in the car and drove home. There was always a risk there. There was always a risk. We shouldn't have done it, but we grow and change.
Yeah. Listen, for us, it was okay. Put him on the can. You know,
Yeah.
that was his riding position for the day. You know, put him on the can.
I'll give you ours. Ours was you stay on the ladder and guard the turntable. Don't let anybody touch that turntable.
Guys, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break to hit the head, refresh our drinks, and come back. And we have a couple of good questions in the socials. So 5 minutes, I promise, and we'll be back. So stick around. More stuff from Mike Callan. I'm enjoying this. This is good times. We'll see you in a couple of seconds. Look at
Hey.
this. Now, while we were refreshing our drinks and everything, a couple of really good questions come in, and I want to talk about one from Ben Russell. I'm going to pop it up here, Bri, because Bri's on the side. About how many people are aware of all the stuff that went on in regards to butyl acrylate air monitoring in East Palestine, and basically Palestine. I would think East Palestine in a whole. What are your comments? What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, the concept of butyl acrylate, as soon as I see the word acrylate, I know exactly one of the biggest problems was if that stuff even got out at a little bit, it'll stink forever. Acrylates. And so odor is one of those things that will pressure a lot of people, and it'll put the incident commander under a lot of stress, one way or the other, whoever's stressful. Then somebody will always come along. We have them here in Connecticut from time to time where we'll tear down a factory. We're going to make a soccer field out of it. Then somebody from the university takes the soil, goes home, samples it, comes back and finds, one of the big, what I call ABCs. It's either going to be arsenic, benzene, or possibly something carcinogen. And then that gets everybody upset. But fear is what drives it. The second part of butyl acrylate, it's a polymer. So now if it's burning and you've got a polymer burning, now you're stuck between, is it going to blevy or is it going to polymerize? And that's a tough one. I didn't follow it as closely as I did, other than the fact that I was a little set back by the fact that you reassure the public by drinking the water. It goes all the way back to when I'm here because of history. They had PCBs in Binghamton, New York, and I think one of the political parties, I don't think it was the governor, maybe the assistant governor, said, well, I'll go up and drink the water to show you how safe it is. We should have come a little further than that.
It's like the Simpsons episode where they eat the three-eyed fish.
I'm a Rick and Morty guy, so I'm not real good. So I can't speak to the particulars, but now on the monitoring, I can tell you we have acrylate, we have butyl acrylate, we have methyl methacrylate. When I was a firefighter, we had what was called nuisance odors, and they tried to pass nuisance odors. Under normal conditions, it smells. So now imagine you have large quantities of percentages, and on that, and people would probably not only smell it, but their nose would begin to react, their eyes might be able to burn, and that drives the fear up. I mean, think about the fact that any white powder was anthrax, and how fast that drove people up the walls. Okay. You talk about regrets. My only regret was I was sitting in Massachusetts that weekend. It all hit, and I had a lady saying, "I'm going back to Florida. Should I be nervous?" And I said, "No, don't worry about it. It's just going to go away. These are the kind of things that happen after, because it was only a month after 9/11." However, there was, we lost one person in Connecticut. Actually, it came through Wallingford's post office. You don't want to tell postal workers they've been around anthrax. They're a fragile group of people to begin with.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Remember the term
I
going
couldn't
postal?
really speak to the monitoring. I know there are certainly people that, as I say, I don't have the answers, but I tell you the next person you talk to on the phone will, because I would send you off to people that have those kinds of high level skill sets.
Hey, Mike, real quick, where do you find the face reports that you were mentioning about earlier?
It's not NIOSH. It's oh God, it's F. Oh boy, I could, if I got up and ran over to the file, I could do it. I just call them face reports because it's. I want to say it's NIOSH if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure somebody out of that 22 people, somebody can look it up for me and tell them where to get one.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to put your email address in the comments right now in case anybody wants to talk to you about it. We'll follow up at the end with your email address again, but if anybody's looking for these face reports, is that okay, Mike?
Yes, absolutely. Those are so powerful when you look at them. Forestville, Maryland is a natural gas explosion. No one even was killed there, and they did such a great work on that event because they bought all their meters, but then they didn't have, it was at the end of their grant money. So they didn't have the money that they could have used effectively at that time to service them, work, because all these meters that we buy, sooner or later, the money's going to dry up and we're going to have to take care of them because the meter is a tool and that tool has to be sharp.
Yeah. I got a question for you.
All right.
What is a piece of advice or a trick from a senior team member that you still remember vividly?
Well, I could give you one that I use all the time is when you're using a meter, I used to, I still do, if it's a big open parking lot, we would turn over a 20-pounder, just crack it, and let the propane come out. I would caution you not to be doing it near sewers, but okay. But then we gave them a big piece of chalk, and we taught this lesson because this is the key, the bit of information. Walk towards that tank with a meter and start measuring, and you will eventually see the meter move. Usually there's a thing called banding, so it doesn't always go 1. It might jump up to 2 or 3. But if you keep moving either left or right or in, that meter is going to begin to change. And if you were to write the numbers on the black top, you would be writing the numbers that you're looking at. So one of the things we try to explain to them is once you see some kind of indication there's a product there, okay, it becomes very valuable to recognize that if you keep going, the numbers will go up. All right.
Sounds simple, but you know what people don't.
Oh no, it's
valid.
not simple. And this is where I would sneak up. I always like to sneak up behind them, and somewhere around 5 or 6% of the LEL, I will hit them with my baseball cap. I'm not supposed to do that anymore, but I would because that they don't understand that the meter. Now I take them all the way back where they can smell it, and I say, well, okay, if it's smell it, it's here. So going forward, you're just going to quantify it with a combustible gas indicator. You're not trying to find it. Now, I say that, but now we talk about the new way. I am absolutely impressed so far. I haven't used it, so I can't say, but I've seen it work. Are these remote methane laser detectors where they can actually find that chemical. I know I was talking to a friend of mine from Phoenix, and Phoenix did a lot with it. The meters that are coming, this is maybe back to Hildebrand too with Mike, is that the technology is going to be so far advanced, even that we'll be able to pick up the majority of chemicals too. Right now, a lot of our technology is designed to protect us from the greatest fears, WMD, things like that. But in the early days of WMD, we got upset because the meter was giving us false readings because it was so good.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a catch-22 in some cases.
I got a good question that just came in from the crowd, from Chris Pfaff. Career question from Mike. How did you shift from teaching one oxidizer class and regional teaching to becoming a national instructor that you become? How did you progress that? What was it? How long, actually, how long
No,
does
I
that
got
take?
the answer. I laugh because I think I remember I told you I was only going to use one word, the word S, because my wife uses it. My wife says his head is filled with stupid shit. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is I just thought of what I usually used to think. I used to think the worst place in the whole world for knowledge was Engine 1, Shift 3, uptown.
Okay.
I went downtown on overtime and I realized they're as dumb as the uptown guys. Then I got overtime after 6 months, and I realized it wasn't shift 3, it was also shift 4. Okay. Then I got a chance to go to Meriden and teach. After the train derailment, they called me up. You want to talk about how it started? This is the magic point. They called me up and they said, Chief Raby called me up and he said, hey, can you come up here and teach a class on hazmat? And I said, Chief, I know about it, but I don't know that I want to teach people about it. He says, the train would have came right through, was coming to Meriden. That was the next stop. We would have had it if it stayed on the tracks long enough. And I said, I don't know, Chief. And then the magic words, we can pay you.
Oh. How do I sign?
Oh, the light bulb. Oh. Now I realized that Meriden, for me, the growing was only, I didn't want to teach for Stanley Tools when they first asked me. Larry Davis, a name from the past, a lot of the guys that know, was a big water guy, big trainer. And he was another guy that took me under his wing. And he's insuring Stanley Tools, and they want us to teach hazmat. We don't want to do it, so we're going to outprice ourselves. They won't hire us if we charge too much. So Larry says, Mike, what are you making? I said, I make about $6 an hour. He says, okay, we'll charge it 12. I said, no, just 12 isn't enough. You got to charge them too. He said, all right, I'll charge them 12. I says, well, $24 an hour, plumbers are making that. He goes, all right, we'll double that, 48. I go, oh, no, 48. No, we'll double it again, 96. No, 96. Let's go to 3 figures. Yeah, let's charge them $100 an hour. We give them the bill on Wednesday. They call us up Thursday saying you're starting Friday.
Wow.
Now, that to us was a lot of money. We did a 24-hour class for those guys, but I learned more from them than they ever learned from me, because I always, it was always back then the fence line. Everybody would think that the chemical would come to the fence and stop. It's a good chemical. It's a corporate chemical,
right. It listens.
Okay. If it came out, that was when we got nervous. Now, we knew all the stuff was bad because they would bring us down. The chemical company I'm thinking about had polymers or monomers. If that monomer started getting reacted, they would call us up and say, hey, you want to come down and see one? Go, yeah. How long do you think? They knew it took about 2 hours. I said, well, we think it's going to go in 2 hours, but I'd give it 1.5. You better get down here. And we would drive down, and we'd all stand out and watch out in now a toxic field that had to be capped. Okay, but back then we just watched this thing, and about an hour later, kaboom, this thing would blow off. That's why when in Connecticut, we had Frank Tostamo talks about it all the time, because one of the guys in his wedding was at this polymerization, United Organics. And these polyacrylonitrile, which, by the way, acrylonitrile has got a great name. It's called methyl cyanide, but they don't like to call it that. Okay. Or vinyl cyanide, excuse me. Anyway, they blew up and coated these guys with hot plastic. Okay. Now, this was before FACE reports, but NIOSH published a report like they did on the incident in Phoenix. We had one for United Organics, and it said, I remember this like yesterday, reading it. The average use of SCBA was 20 minutes, and yet they had almost 25 or 30 people. 4 went off the job, never came back. Other people were breaking out within 2 or 3 days of sores around their face. Average use of breathing apparatus, 20 minutes, which told me it was 1 tank and then drop the pack.
Yep.
Which is what we used to do, because it was really the smoke. I almost made a sign that I would have made in the firehouse that I can't make on TV. So, no, you can't, that's how we looked at these things. They didn't learn from their lessons. And that's what always drove me. I've been a teacher all my life. I didn't mention at the beginning, when I was at Franklin, I was majoring in education. I was going to be a teacher. The only thing that where God stepped in is I majored in K through 3, which made it much easier by the time I started getting into the fire service.
I was going to say, you're still a teacher.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just took a hook through the fire department.
You know, I'll tell you a little story. My wife never wanted my sons. She saw one fire. My mother used to go to all of them. So there's a fire downtown, and it's a taxpayer, and I'm on the roof cutting, and my wife sees this thing, and my mother is standing there. My wife says, "I want to go home." My mother says, "Why?" And she said, "I want to go home. I don't want to see this." And she never went. She never went to another fire. She doesn't want to see the fire. She was always nervous about it. And so she says, "I don't want my sons to be firemen." I said, "Okay." And both of my sons are teachers because they never saw me fight fires. They've always saw me teach. One is a teacher in the inner city in New Haven. The other is teaching in Qatar right now because it's probably 8 o'clock, and I don't know. But he started teaching in England, and now he's teaching in Qatar for 3 years before he goes back to England. So
unbelievable.
It is.
Right.
It is. It is.
I got one for you. One for you. Favorite prank, whether it's in the firehouse or
I give you my hazmat one.
Yes.
Turn their breathing apparatus off. Step behind them and start turning the valve. Okay, and see what happens when they run out of air. The smart guy reaches back in a level B. The smart guy will reach back and check his tank. The guy that pulls his mask off says, "You know, you may not be dead, but you may not make it to the door."
All right, I'll give you a quick funny story. I know the story's not about me, but I did that at a fire once, and I was trying to get through a door, and in New York City, they say that there's a doorman. And so the guy is supposed to move the hose around the corner, but this guy is the big guy, and he just blocks the whole doorway. And so I had to get through, and he wouldn't let me through, so I started shutting off a cylinder, but I was doing it from the side. And so when his air went off, he turned around and punched the chief right in the face. And then I just went right through the door.
Yeah, that's a career ender right there for a while.
It could have been if he saw me, but
I've messed with the air from time to time. Papper class, you know, you unscrew the filter, and you know you do a little flatulence right into the back of the papper, right into their face.
I think we could probably run with this, but I've got a picture of the best one. Is that I was doing it for I won't mention the department, but we used the little peanuts, all the little peanuts, the plastic peanuts, and we would throw them in there, and they were supposed to pick them all up. And it was a hot day. I mean, the first team goes in, they take their glove off, and they turn it upside down, and water is coming out of the glove. Yeah. So I know it's hot. Heat stress was not an issue there yet. So we had two things. So the first guy goes in, the second guys are getting ready, so they put on another suit that's been sitting there, and he goes in and he's working. I come up close, and I've got the picture of it. I use it a lot. Is that I notice that I'm looking at the words extra large. He's gotten into the seat upside down. Okay. Oh, he got in his seat upside down, his suit upside down, inside out. I don't know how they did it, but I said, "Weren't you confused when the zipper was on the inside?" And he goes, "I think there is he thought it was like a two zipper, like he used to have on his old coats. So, you know, wondering, could I turn it?" So, I mean, it's those kinds of things. I'm laughing because Hildebrand sent me a question. I don't know whether it came through you guys or not, but we taught together in Minnesota, and the reason I'm laughing is I haven't even thought about it. We were going to a class to teach in a town in a community college called the Anoka Hennepin Community College. The problem was there were 8 of them, and we didn't know where we were going. We went to 2 or 3 before we figured out what was going on. We were teaching hazmat. Thank God we had a video we had a 45-minute video, and Hildebrand called. I don't even know how we called. I don't know whether we had cell phones back then, but somebody got to the point where play the video, that'll buy us another 45 minutes. So, you know, there's always something you can do to make things work.
So, all right. So from your time back in, what did I write down? 72. From the time you got on the job in 72 to now.
Yeah.
There has been tremendous changes in technology. I mean, all the way up to even since the time that right, like, we now have FTIR gas detection. Like, so the technology has changed tremendously. What do you feel like for you was the most significant change that took place in your time frame? Like when you sit back, when you sit back and you look and you go, man, I can't believe we went from A to Z in this span. Like, what is it for you?
Okay, well, I'll give you the starting point and you'll see it coming. We started because we only had bunker gear and we would tape it. Okay. Now, without getting into the decorum of this, most corrosives in Wallingford are attracted to warm, moist mucous membranes of your body. Wearing 3/4 boots, okay, was not the best solution. Okay. And half of the time they were folded, and you guys know half the time they're folded down.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we realized we needed a suit. Okay. And what they did was we wanted a suit. So they had butyl rubber. So we said, can we get a butyl rubber suit for practice? They go, yeah, we got a couple with holes in it. You can use them, but don't use them in an incident. Okay. Now, the reason that was because the warm, moist mucous membranes could only be protected by Vaseline. Okay. And we would buy Vaseline and we put it under our arms. Now, the irony of this is we would go to the other side of the truck to protect us from the chemical so it wouldn't see us applying in other off-color areas. Okay. However, that's the side that the civilians were on. Okay. So then we had to put up these carpets. So anyway, we're doing that. That was stupid, we said to ourselves. So now what we're going to do is we're going to need a suit. We couldn't afford a suit. So we get an old suit and we go down to the hardware store and we buy patches for inner tubes.
Bicycle patches, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And now we've put bicycle tacks on everything. And now we got a suit that holds air. I think we were some of the first people that used air testing. We blow it up and it wouldn't leak. So we're good. Now, with that in mind, we discover there's new stuff. Now, this is where we're going to start. White was Tyvek. Yellow was Tyvek covered by vinyl. I'm doing it again.
What is that? That's got to be on your side.
Maybe it's my Apple.
Maybe I've never. All right, I'm going to try it. Is this you or is it me?
I'll do it again. 2.
Do it.
Well, I didn't recognize it. 1, 2, and 3 was Serenex. Okay, now if you don't know what Serenex is, open up your cupboard and pull out Serenex, wrap yourself in it, and we were doing the same thing.
Can I just tell you? All right,
protection for Vaseline is a B+.
Right. So I just want you to know that about 2 years ago, for April Fools, we came up with a Vaseline-based PPE as like the new level of protection that's coming out as like an April Fool's gag. So the fact that you actually at one point use Vaseline for chemical protection is like that is making me laugh so hard.
You got to understand now. You got to understand that Vaseline on a gauze pad was what was called occlusive dressing for a bullet wound.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Well, let me ask you. So we get each other dressed in PPE. Did you guys apply Vaseline to each other?
I think there was a point where that would never have been thought of. Okay.
I'm gonna die today. Keep your hands to yourself.
It was every man for himself. But remember, I was telling you the guy with the belt buckle that changed color? He was a very traditional oriented individual. He didn't want to try the new stuff.
Very
But
soft
now you
hands.
take that first level, and then Serenex became a level A, although it wasn't a level A because it was only elastics. Then we got a piece of plastic. I was just looking at it the other day. I got this big bag I call my clothing bag, and I went in and I found all this stuff because I used to bring it out and lay it all over the table and show it. So we kept working. So what I wanted to make a point was, with everything we did, we went further down the road. Okay, it was always trying it. I knew a girl by the name of Janet Thiem. She worked for DuPont. She was one of the first people that worked with Jim Ziegler and people like that understood it. Kapler used to work for DuPont.
Yeah.
And those people began to realize that they could make suits, okay, effective suits. However, we would ask for a bigger face piece, or when we bent down, the butt would rip out, okay, which is not a good concept if you were on if you were dealing with a corrosive chemical. So we quickly, then we kept getting bigger and bigger and better and better and better, to the point there was one time where you would have a certified suit that was fire, chemical, breathing out. You had 3 levels. We did a drill with cyanamide. They had bought the new ones. And when this guy went to walk towards the drill, somebody had to run out and move him to point to him in the right direction because he couldn't see where he was going because of so many facial protections. So
I got a question, and this just popped in my head, but I'm because again, we're talking about the beginning of hazmat, and I know, Mike, you definitely know better than me, but if memory serves, it was something like in Jacksonville was the first one, and then in like the early 80s was like the big stand-up of like Chicago and FDNY and Houston.
Oh, yeah.
Blah, blah. Well, with you guys figuring out that Vaseline was a thing, how was the communication? There wasn't social media back then.
there wasn't communication.
There wasn't faxes back then. There was letters. And so how were teams sharing their understanding at this point in time?
Pigeons.
No, I'm going to tell you, and I'll give you credit where credit is due. And you've got a couple of them here listening. Mike Hildebrand, Greg Knoll, Roger McGarry. The 3 counties around D.C. got together. I think it was 3. PG, Rockville. Rockville must have been Montgomery County. I'd have to turn to Michael on that. I don't know the details. D.C. and Fairfax County. They decided to have a conference in the early 80s where they would come together. I missed the first one. Frank went. He comes back and he says, Mike, there are guys just like us down there, and they have the same problems. And I went to the next one. I've gone to everyone ever since then, is that it was word of mouth. That's how you ended up doing it. Now, there was a video. They put out a video. I say a video. God, it was a 16 millimeter film.
It was real. It was
Yes,
real.
on what was going on in Jacksonville. It was called Hazardous Materials. And that was because of Ron Gore. So what was happening is Ron was one of the first traveling salesmen. He would go out and train. Ludi Benner had some hazmat, or it's not Ludi, Brannigan. Brannigan had some radioactive skill sets that we started learning about. And then all of a sudden I meet a Greg Knoll. I meet a Bill Hand. I mean, and Mike Hildebrand and Dave Lesack and all these guys were all there together. Rem Gady from Toronto. Oh my God, there's hazmat across the border, because they had Mississauga in '79. Okay, that was the chlorine explosions or ruptures. I always remember this because I have a videotape where the guy is saying, well, fortunately, no one was hurt. Now we're going to go to Betty at the hospital with the firefighters.
You know what? After being where I worked, I would have no doubt that they weren't actually. Never mind.
So the whole thing was word of mouth. Then you would share. I'm not going to criticize, but I will tell you that when we first started going to conferences, you gave away as much as you could, back and forth, everything shared. One slide. I got into an argument with Larry Davis over a slide where he said, well, that's your slide. I said, no, it's not. It's your slide. He goes, no, it's not my slide. It's your slide. We didn't know who owned the slide. Okay. But here's the thing. I go to conferences now, and I got to tell you, I get a little bittersweet. I do it myself. Everybody's got their name or their company on the slide someplace. We went from trying to say, and we're still trying to do it, okay, because the reason I started teaching, Frank and I both said we're going to charge simply that we can go to conferences without having to take food out of our kids' mouth.
Right.
Okay.
You know what? That's a funny thing you should say that, because I know we've gone through the evolution of going to conferences to make money, and now it's just like, okay, we've reduced. I don't want to say pricing, so we don't lose. Like, I'll come. I'll spend the time and effort. I'll come, and I enjoy the networking and the speaking and the shaking of the hands and people buying beers or me buying them beers or whatever it might be. That's fun. I enjoy that, because those relationships are important. And I think, like, to your point of going to these things and having these interactions and moving the ball from east to west to north to south is an important thing. But at the same time, it's like, maybe I'm not defending my point. I'm just saying that I put my logo on and I put our stuff on because you might like our brand and you might want more of MikeCallan.com or Bobby Salveson and the Hazmat guys. They can bring those flavors in. We do the same class, Mike. It's just that you do your flavor and I do my flavor.
Right. I think that once you find your niche, this is the legacy part with me. Okay, is I figured out, there are ways to do what you want to do, and you reach a point where if you keep trying to grow, it's the Peter principle. Okay. I can tell you everything about electricity, but I'm not as good with the high-end battery. The last battery class I had a small picture of a AA and a picture of a telephone company with wet cells all over the place. That was a little battery. That's a big battery. Okay. Okay. And then once we got to the lithium ion and information like that, it's a whole new. It's like going from solar to wind. It's everything. It's generating the electricity. I can tell you still get electrocuted. You can still do things with it, but that follows electricity. But that's going to be everything is going to bring something new to the table. And I'm not complaining about it, but for me, getting older, I decided, you know what? I'm happy where I am. I'm glad to do it. Now that COVID's behind us, I feel like let's put it this way. I say it all the time. There's a whole generation of firefighters that don't know who I am.
No, but you know what? The thing is that your teachings and listen, I'm not pumping his book, but if you don't have street smart chemistry, you're not a hazmat guy. I'll be honest with you. I've gotten more out of that book than half the college chemistry things that I've ever done. But I'm going to parlay that into a question / probably something a little uncomfortable for you, is that I can see from the shelving behind you. I know some of those awards that are behind you, and they are from Continuing Challenge and the Baltimore Conference and et cetera et al. What are some of the more significant contributions that you can put your name on, or at least contributed to that move?
Well, I had without getting too historical, but I know Michael know about it. But Mike Hildebrand and I he was doing work for General Motors, and Greg couldn't make it, and he asked me if I wanted to come, and we walked around a golf course, and I always remember Mike saying to me, and we talked about it even there. He looked at me and he said, "I wish I could be more like you, Mike." And I looked at Hildebrand and I went, Mike, I wish I could be more like you. And the whole relationship between Mike and Greg was, in the early days, we each had something we did really well. We could all do what everybody else did, but Mike was a great writer, good political kind of guy. I make a joke. I don't go to D.C. until I call Mike Hildebrand as a guide, because if you go down there, first of all, I don't trust anybody that uses initials. Okay, so if you're using initials, I don't want to talk to you. Okay, I want to know what you are. And if you don't believe me, look up the Patriot Act and see if you can figure out what those words were, because they started with an acronym and backfilled it.
Yes, they did.
So, which I always felt was pretty much an insult to us. So anyway, without getting too, I can get belligerent from time to time. I've learned that being belligerent is not productive. Okay, so, especially in 46 years of marriage. Although I've been happily married 38 and a half, but that's, no, I don't worry about that, because Bonnie's down into single figures. So,
so what is it like? What is the thing that you can, that you look at it and say, and you're like, yes, my name is all over that. I had major contribution.
Well, I think that Greg asked me this the last year in Florida. He said, what 3 words would you use to describe myself? And I didn't think twice. I just said safe, unsafe, and dangerous. I mean, I look at that. I look at that saying, if I think of, in fact, now I use it now as safety, because I'll do incident command, or I'll do something and I'll talk about safety. I use it for company officers, because if the roof is spongy, you don't call another guy up there to jump and get his opinion. Here, jump up and down, see if it's spongy to you. No, you say it's spongy, and it turns out that it didn't collapse. That doesn't make you a bad person. I get very upset over the fact that if I order somebody out when I was on the job, and you give me that 5 more minutes, Chief, I don't know how to say it without swearing, but I would have said, I've already given you 30 minutes to fool with it. Okay, I can't take it anymore. You're coming out.
You're out.
And so I wouldn't have that conversation on the fire ground. But if he didn't like it, there's always 3 other shifts you can go to work for. Okay, I think I've said this to most people. I worried my whole life about the why. If something happened, people would come to me and say, "Why did that happen? You were in charge." Mm-hmm. And I like to think the hazmat guys are the safety officers. When I tell, even with electricity and natural gas, I tell them, they say, well, how do we reach firefighters? I says, you don't reach firefighters. I'm doing a program now that's called Utilities or IDLH. When I learned what IDLH was from the Green Book, the Forest Service NIOSH pocket guide, or NIOSH guide, that guys like Chap Pierce and Mike Moore were using to write 1910-120. Okay, and they brought in IDLH, and when I discovered what IDLH is, that's why there's 4 or 5 slides in safe, unsafe, and dangerous, is because you need to be able to recognize IDLH, just like backdraft is IDLH, flashover is IDLH. There are different signs, but a red cloud is IDLH. You don't need a meter. Hey, look, there's a red cloud. Oh, go get the meter. Get a pH. No, who's going to take that in? So I think that would be one. And then the other things was back to Mike and Greg. They let me work with them on propane emergencies. They let me work with them on pipeline emergencies. They let me, for several years, I was helping them and working on the training for managing the incident. That relationship went a long way for me feeling that, you know what, we really are doing things. There's a lot of good instructors out there. And it'll take, think about what Benner did for us. And there's guys that don't even know who Benner is.
No, there's people that don't even that whole concept of the behavioral models, they don't even, like, you start to stitch that together in class and they're like, oh wow, that's pretty incredible. And I'm like, this is what the foundation of all this has been built on. How are you only understanding this now for the first time?
If you go to the conferences like Houston and you go to, I always say Rockville, but if you go to the IAFC conference in Baltimore, or some of the larger conferences out there, you're going to still get to see people. You get to see a Bill Hand teach. You get to see these guys do programs, the chemistry guys. There's 4 or 5 of them, all of them. I wouldn't even try to sort them. If you say, I'm going to see a chemistry guy, you give me his name and I'll tell you right now, you're going to get something out of this class, okay? Dufek, Weber, all those guys are really good at what they do. And I think that's the good thing about it, is that we all started wanting to be instructors, okay? And there's still those guys. You go to FDIC, they're that young group that wants to be there. What I get upset about, and I had one happen to me about maybe 3 years ago, I'm talking to one of these guys, and I looked at him, and he had a blank stare. And in his eyeballs, I could see the reflections of a dinosaur.
Oh, no. Okay,
this guy was looking at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. I'm that grumpy 30-year-old, the grumpy 70 plus that would give you the 30-year-old story, is that there's always a guy in the back of the room sitting there like this when you try to give him a new idea, especially when you're young. You got this new idea, and these guys will tell you, they'll be honest. They'll go, huh, that ain't going to work. And these young guys bite the bait. What do you mean? Why? Why? Because we tried that 30 years ago and it didn't work.
Right. Been there, done that. Okay.
But then there's the other guys that stay the course. It's funny, when somebody asks me, what does it take to be a change agent in the fire service? And I always have said, you need 10 years in grade. You need 10 years and you got to be an officer. If you really want to make change, that'll open up the doors for you. I've only seen a couple of people that have beat that system. One is Bill Hand, but he was a chief in another fire department before he became when he got to Houston, he didn't want rank. Okay, he just wanted to be hazmat.
Well, coming up, you did a tremendous amount in the as being one of the grandfathers of hazmat, policy making and SOPs and things like that. What are some of I can imagine that with all the different personalities out there growing this field from scratch, not everybody saw eye to eye. So what were some of the major debates that you were involved in back and forth trying to grow the SOPs and operations? And I can imagine some of these conferences in the beginning you went to and you walked out and been like, oh my God, I can't believe that guy thought that.
No, I tell you, one of the things, I'll give you the answer for me, is that I learned to value consensus, okay? Even though I'm an individual and I look at things individually, the consensus process for me was very powerful because I don't know what essentials is now. I think essentials of firefighting is 7 or 8 or 9. I was on 3. I was on the essentials committee for 3. It took us 3 years to write the 3rd edition. Out of those 20 plus guys, there must have been 10 or 11 of us that came with one ambition, was the Essentials 1 and Essentials 2 did not have a chapter on safety. We wanted a chapter on safety. We were already teaching safety, but we had to build them ourselves to teach them for rookie, because I was doing rookie training then. And that consensus taught me that, there are people out there, good thoughts will always win out. There are some crazy thoughts, but when you're sitting with a bunch of guys, and so take that and just, what I mean by consensus is there's a lot, if you get the right committees, NFPA 472 was a good time to come along. It was the right time, although I still have the letter that told NFPA, said that they did not need me on NFPA 472 because they were already well represented by other members of my organization. Gary Tokol regrets that, even when I see him now. Okay. Okay. Not that I was wrong. He was right about there were more better people than me. Mike and Craig, those guys. God, there's a whole bunch of them. I couldn't read off the committee. So that the consensus of committees and how that evolved. Look at how 472 kept growing, and then they switched, and we've got now 4-digit numbers, which means it must be better. Okay,
Yeah,
we've got 4 digits. So that is always that because, and if you bring in new guys like in a fire department and bring them up, that's the whole legacy. I mean, I learned that in rookie training. You want to train a firefighter, change the course of fire service, get him while he's a rookie. Because if you don't, when he goes back to the firehouse, they're going to beat him with 2x4s. They'll be waiting for him at the door saying, I don't care what you learned there. This is the way we do it. Here's the mop, kid. For me, I want a coffee and a roll. Go over to Wendy's. Because back then, we didn't even have a kitchen. We had a kitchen, but it wasn't anything. They would send the rookie out across the street, and you would have to carry all this stuff back. And you would have to run if they go out, because when you got on the apron, they would hit the horn 3 times, and you had to come out of wherever you were. Guys were getting haircuts. You know, it was a different time back then. And whatever you did, never touched the solvents underneath the sink.
All right, I'm going to wrap up our conversation with probably the doozy, the blockbuster. At the end of the run, and I don't want to say this too macabre or anything, but at the end of Mike Callan, what do you want to be remembered for? What are the things you wish you could do differently or change or have done, or what do you want to be remembered for? I really don't mean this to be a dark thing, but I'm saying, like, everybody has in their mind what they want on their epitaph, and like, what did you move the ball that you're proud of, and things that you like? I wish I stayed away from that shit.
Okay.
It's a deep one. I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh no, it's not a deep one. It's just it's got to be put in order because it's a generational transition going from where you were. I have faults. I have lots of faults, and I've had them my whole life, and I still fight with them. I wish I could have been. When I talk about Mike Hildebrand, I wish I could have been a better businessman. But on the other hand, I always wanted to teach, okay? And I went to school wanting to teach. And I didn't realize what teaching was, even when I was in elementary school. Or teaching I learned to teach, how to teach at Franklin College, Indiana. I learned how to train and help people learn. I have a slide that says, if my students failed to learn, then I failed to teach. It's my job, not yours.
Love that.
Okay. So, and I have tried to do that now. K through 3 is a powerful lesson to learn, because all those people want, K through 3, is give me information. Teach me. They don't care. They're not rolling their eyes yet.
Sponges.
They're sponges. I could do that with rookies. Okay, those rookies are sponges. Okay, they've never seen fire. That's why I go say, well, you know, when you have a fire, I take them through degrees of what they have to do. I can't do it today, but when they have live fire, they come out, and my old guys are dying to wait to be the first guy to say what after live fire. When the rookie says hot, what do they want to say?
I've seen hotter.
That ain't hot.
I've seen hotter.
I've seen hotter. Well, you know what I say now? Even now, you just ruined my calibration. I calibrated them to get to a point where they know hot. And if it gets hotter than that, they'll do what?
punch
They'll
out.
come
They'll get
out.
Right.
They'll come out. You just-
But when the old timer says that it's
bravado.
not, you look at the way we fight fires in the old days, we would never say hot. In fact, you didn't ever say hot. You just growled and grumbled all the way down the hallway until somebody broke and said hot. And then everybody else went, oh, yeah, it's hot. It's hot. It's hot. All right, back out. But I wasn't the first one that said hot.
It wasn't me.
Not me. Now, when I do instructor training or first line supervisor, lieutenant training, that's his job to say hot. His job ain't to push it. His job is either to push or pull. We got too many people pushing, okay? Not enough pulling back. And in hazmat, we pull back. We invented, when I picked up in 72 studying for lieutenant, I had Clark's Principles and Practices, New York City firefighter, Mackinac. I studied Mackinac. And in both of those books, there was no non-intervention. It was only offensive, defensive, and then defensive, offensive, and offensive, defensive.
Right,
We only had 4. There was no non-intervention. Hazmat invented non-intervention. Don't go in. Let it burn. That's a big
Which now
thing.
it seems like it makes sense. It's just such a simple concept. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you? But like you're saying, back in the day, that wasn't a thing, and you had to fight an uphill battle to get that put into books.
You know, and to take it to the closing, for me anyway, is Brooksy said it when he introduced me, and I think of this all the time, and I try to live up to it. I never thought I did. I have the phrase I use to get there is I've never met a fireman I don't like. There are some I like more than others, but I ain't never met a guy. I do not like, if I see a blue shirt and I got a Maltese cross on it, I'm going to talk to him. And Brooksy said to me, you know, when I see him here at the conference, if you talk to him, he will talk to you. And he'll talk to you like he's known you, and he'll try to help you in any way he can. Greg Knoll does it. I had a young kid in my that worked with me, and we were in Cincinnati, I think. We were up in the hospitality room, and Pete comes down. Now, Pete Suski's a big player now in his industry. He comes down, he says, Greg Knoll talked to me. I go, yeah. He said, he talked to me like a real person. I said, yeah, he's going to talk to you like a real person. Did he answer your questions? Yeah, he really did.
It was amazing.
You know, and I think that's what we all do. I think that's what we all do. If you really want to get there, you got to give some of it away. You can't get there holding it all together. It's just going to be too heavy. Right. You got to give it away. It's one of those things that I'm looking at now. How can I don't want this to go. I can tell you right now, Bill Hand and I have the same fear that, you know, in the old days, we were worried that our wives would basically take everything we had and throw it in the dumpster. Okay. Bill, that's not going to be the case with Bill, but it could easily be the case here. And that's why I'm trying to get everything into your format now, discs. I mean, I'm trying to get the 20 chapters onto a disc. Virtual training that we did, everything we've ever done. I just found something just cleaning up my office, six CDs of me teaching in Longmont because I wanted to do more pipeline. It was the first time I was teaching pipeline before we wrote Pipeline Emergencies. I was doing it for Pipeline Association. So I just thought I cared. I would like to think I wish I could have cared more for my family, but because you can't do both, and that's what happens. This is one of the reasons they get mad. But I look at my sons now. Mike is helping me. I called him Dad the other day. He said something, and I said, "Yeah, I love you too, Dad." And I went, "Oh my God!" Okay, and he's helping me, and you know, that's it. Anything else, I would just get emotional. I would say, if she's listening upstairs, if it wasn't for her, I don't know where I'd be. She was always there. Have you ever heard Bette Midler sing "The Wings"? The wind beneath my wings.
Yes. That's her.
I would not be where I am, especially the first line. I was always in the spotlight. You were always, that first phrase that she
That's
starts
crazy.
saying, is just too much for me sometimes. So, all right.
I gotta say, like even from this, like, and just kind of wrapping up here is like this whole. I just want everybody out there that's listening to understand that this whole concept was born out of Mike's mind. And I said we talked many years ago about doing something like this, bottling up and kind of moving on. And Mike had a long conversation with me in the Indiana
Yeah.
hazmat conference, and we sat down and we had a great time until two bozos sat down and just invited themselves into our conference. No,
No. Actually, I got to tell you, you still owe me those two bozos names because they've asked me for something and I want to send them, and they're not bozos. They're critical elements to me being where I want to be in my legacy.
It was Chuck from Chicago Fire Department Rescue Battalion. I think he's the chief.
Yeah, and the other guy was a training officer from Chicago.
Yeah,
That came up today. All right, I'll give you a good last anecdote. Chicago ComEd took down the electricity. We're getting more people in Chicago coming on our website because we don't feel comfortable taking it down because it saved lives. We got more people there and nobody's paying for it. So now I got to go back and talk to somebody.
Oh my God. Well, you are getting tons of love in the social media. Everybody from Christina Baxter, there's been quite a few people that have stayed on with us for the entire
Thank you very much, folks.
Mike, it's been a pleasure. And this is, I'm sure, not Mike Callan's only time on the show. I'm sure there's going to be more questions and there's going to be more stuff. You can see his email below, mikecallan.com@gmail.com. Ask him questions. Get him involved in your classes. Get him involved in your conferences. Get him involved in your life. You will be a better person with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
Mike.
would at least attempt to do all the things that he just promised you.
Guys, until next month, we are making negotiations with a couple other people for next month's people to be on the show. But check back, and we will catch you guys soon. Thanks.